All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. It is time for our first post-game edition of Silver and Black today. Scott Branson, along with Raiders Fan Radio's Murph, who joins us as well as he does throughout the season with our Voice of the Fan. He gives us all that we need from the emotional side. I'm sure he'll have plenty to say today. We'll get to that. Do us a favor, too. By the way, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio. This post-game show brought to you by our good friends at BetUS. If you're betting football, check them out. We certainly appreciate their support. Also, as I said last year, and we do it all the time here, any super chats, if you decide to donate any money, it goes right to the One Nation Foundation, which Murph will tell you about later in the show. But that benefits Raiders charities like Raider Dad, everything. So just hang in with us. We'll give you that at the end of the show. But if you want to do super chat, you can do that, and we would appreciate it. And that'll go to a good cause to help Raiders charities. The Raiders lose 22-10 to the Los Angeles Chargers in a tough one. The Raiders defense came out, was everything everyone thought they would be, played a great game at the end. Of course, they gave up a little bit there, but to be expected, the Raiders offense just could not get anything going. And Gardner Minshew's first game as a starter, he does go 25 of 33 with 257 yards with a touchdown, but also with an interception and a fumble as well. Raiders commit 3 turnovers as well. Big part of the game here, and just couldn't get the offense. We're going to get into all of that. We'll also get your comments here. I see them streaming in big time. But Murph, let's go to you first. Obviously, as a fan, I said before we went on the air to you that your 17-0 prediction, as you do every year, because you're an optimistic fan. And by the way, I saw your show the other day where people telling you shouldn't be as much as a fan. It's Raiders Fan Radio. You should be a fan. That's why we have you on our show as well, because we want to give fans the voice that they have, and you do that for us. But tell me a little bit about your thoughts. This game started off, it looked pretty good to start off with. Raiders go down and score, and it looks good from an offensive standpoint. Not perfect, but it looked good. And of course, the defense came out firing. Give me your thoughts off the bat on how this one went down, because this game, I think pretty much everyone had thought, well, this is a good way for the Raiders to start. They got to go to Baltimore next week on the road with a tough one. 2 games on the road to start the season. This one just did not go its way. Just a really bad loss. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think first off, thank you for having me. It's always a blast to join you here on Silver and Black today. Appreciate you, Scott. And yeah, I think here's the thing that's the most challenging part for me as a Raider fan is that and I've said this, I'm pretty sure I've said this on this show before. It doesn't matter who the coach is, who the quarterback is, what the overall personnel is, front office, what city they play in, you name it, it's kind of the same thing every year. And this offseason, we became bolstered by expectation. I mean, and I'm not losing faith in week 1. This was a pretty devastating. I mean, losing to a freaking division rival in week 1 and a team that, frankly, you were, probably, it was a home game for us. The matchups were strong, like all the things that leading into it, would have equated to a Raider win. So it's a pretty big loss, but the season is not lost. So I'm not completely lost in terms of, having hope for the entirety of the season. But all that said, like, it's the same stuff. It's the same things that we've seen. It's like you have this clutch guy, that kicks field goals for you, and he misses one. And then you have a head coach making inconsistent decisions when it comes to short yardage. You have a guy that seemingly had good hands fumbling the football, both from the quarterback position and the running back position. You had a defense that was balls out and lights out for most of the game, and then just kind of freaking just mailed it in at the end of the game. And so it's just like, I hate to say it, Raider Nation, but it's the same things. And I don't know. I don't want to make light of the term PTSD, but it's like, it's the same shit that we've been freaking, it's like, I'll say this and I'll shut up and turn it back over to you. It's tough, Scott, as a Raider fan to enjoy games at times. And I mean, because it's like, okay, well, let's have this explosive play to Alexander Madison. And like, we take the lead. It's like, okay, we got some explosiveness to this offense. Defense is playing great. But I like, as a fan, I'm like sitting there on my couch going like, oh yeah, wait for the nastiness to hit. And eventually it just does. And that's an awful thing to feel as a sports fan, as a Raider fan.
Yeah, it is. And again, I think the defense came out and looked like everyone thought they would look, right? They came out very strong and played strong throughout the game. And I think that you can't, and this is one thing that I told our listeners, and I think you might have said it too several times on your show with the gang there, which is yes, you can even have a dominating defense, but you have to score points. You can't win in the NFL scoring 10 points. You just can't do it. So if you can be middle of the road in offense and have a great defense, great. That's perfect. That's fine. But today, what we saw with the Raiders was their inability to really get anything going on offense other than that first drive. And again, I said it after that first quarter, up until late in the fourth quarter, they didn't have a drive over 20 yards. They had 2 drives over 20 yards the entire game. And that's just not going to cut it. And I think that, yes, a lot of it's going to fall on Gardner Minshew. I see a lot of the comments, well, we don't have a quarterback, which, look, you knew going in that you kind of had this situation with the quarterbacks. You knew it was going to be up and down. It was not going to be a frontline starter type of situation. We just knew that. At the same time, you also have a new offensive coordinator. I don't want people to forget. We've been suspect, as you know, Mo and I have talked all summer about Luke Getsy and saying he's going to have to prove a lot. He's got players, he's got weapons. Yeah, the quarterback situation is dicey, but he's got Bowers, he's got Mayer, he's got Jacoby Myers, he's got Devontae Adams. And I think we saw today too, I saw a lot of what I saw in Chicago last year with the offensive play calling. I didn't see a lot of imagination. I saw points when they were using 13 personnel, had both tight ends. It worked really well for a little bit, but there was no rhythm except for maybe a couple series here and there with the offense. There was no rhythm there. And so I think that this, to me, is the big concern. Yes, I get the quarterback thing. I know everybody's going to take it out, even though numbers can lie. We know that. And if you just looked at Gardner Minshew's numbers, you'd say, okay, well, yeah, not great, but not terrible. Yet the offense overall just didn't go. The offensive line struggled at first. I think they came along a little bit towards the end when you saw Zamir White run the ball despite the fumble. But I think that this is not just a one situation. This is not just, well, if you had a different quarterback, this offense would have done better today. I think that the Luke Getsy situation and the creativity on offense and the game plan, I'm just a little surprised by the game plan. We'll get into also some Antonio Pierce issues because I think there were some of those too. But I do think that offensive game plan, did you see some of that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, coming out in the second half, I think it was Romo there made a comment about how it was like, okay, like what are the adjustments going to look like in the second half? And I had people tweet me, be like, okay, Getsy did fine, but let's see how he adjusts. And it's like the Chargers seemingly, and without looking at tape, and I'm not a tape guy to begin with, I'm just a fan, but like they seemingly press the line of scrimmage in the second half, and there was no threat of pushing the ball downfield, none. Like there was no Trey Tucker. There was no Devontae Adams. There was none of that. And so it's like everything was short and they were pressed up and then they were committed to the line of scrimmage and then everything freaking went to pot after that. And so I think that lack of ability to adjust, and I almost kind of hate that term, like, oh, you adjust, because we don't know what the coach's game plans are. We don't know what the playbooks are. We don't know what those things are. But seemingly, at least for the optics, Scott, is that like what did the Raiders do to take advantage of what the Chargers were giving them, or at least what they were presenting with them on defense? And we didn't do any of that, and then made mistakes on top of that. And so it just compounded things. It was just, and so the second half was just a downhill slide. And I want to address, I can't remember who it was in the chat room there, said something about Derek Carr. And I don't want to totally throw this show off the rails here, but like, take it easy with the Derek Carr shit. And I saw a lot of that today. They played the goddamn Panthers, and anybody that watched any of that game, like, listen, the Panthers are going to pencil them in for Travis Hunter. Like, they're going to get the number 1 pick in the draft. They're an awful, awful football team. Seeming week 17, Derek Carr would not have been the savior of this team today. Like, let's not go there. And let's why rewind that clock anyways? Like it doesn't promote anything. All it does is just, it's mental masturbation at this point. Sorry, Scott.
That's okay.
Like, don't go that way. It's a ridiculous sentiment to even lament about it. We have what we have now, and how can the Raiders get better from here forward? Look, we got freaking our asses handed to us today, offensively. So what can the Raiders do? Is there a world where they can improve? I'm not completely, although Scott, this was rough. There's still a long way to go. There's still freaking 16 more games to play in this season. We got a long way to go in this season, and it's not over. I don't think anybody expected the Raiders to freaking come out of the gate and win all 17 except for me. or maybe Michelle, who thought they were going to win 14 and shut out Michelle. But outside of that, no one thought they were going to 7, 8, 9, 10 win team. Like that's about where we're at. And there's a lot of winnable games, although this was a very winnable game and they should have won this game. I'm not going to diminish my disappointment in this, Scott, but we got a long way to go and still, I think, a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and I would underscore that too. It's one game, and clearly there was a lot, I think, of positive. There was a lot of optimism, and so I understand fans being upset about it. And the Derek Carr revisit. Listen again, and I agree with you on this because you can't go and change the past. First of all, those decisions were made by a previous regime. The GM and the coach are no longer here. Those were made. It doesn't matter. With this team, with Derek Carr, you don't know what he would have done. So it doesn't spend any time. What you have now is what you have, to your point, Murph. So I think you have to look at that and look at the path forward. Yes, incredibly disappointing because there is no joy in what you saw on the Raiders offense. No. And to me, look, Gardner Minshew, of course, again, I know the quarterback's going to get all the glory and get all the criticism, but I'm more concerned, again, with Luke Getsy. Like you said, it's one game. Okay. So you have to wait and see what they do. Now they go to Baltimore. They're going to take on an even better defense out there. And so we'll see what kind of quote unquote adjustments they make. But I think that was it. I think to your point about not attacking downfield, not showing a lot of creativity very much at all. I thought that even last year with all the problems they had with a guy who had never called plays before, they at least at times showed some creativity. And I didn't see that today. And I know a lot of people, bring Aiden O'Connell in. Look, I don't think Aiden O'Connell is going to get a shot. Gardner Minshew, yes, he had the 2 turnovers. Okay. If he continues that against Baltimore, then you start to think about the conversation about switching quarterbacks because you cannot give the ball away. And that's really what ended up being the difference in this game today, Raider Nation, is the fact that they gave up the football. And when you give up the football in the NFL, you're not going to win. Also, I do think, and we get to this, and it might be polarizing, but I also don't think Antonio Pierce had a great game either. Not all his fault, but even late, the 4th and 1, he had no confidence in his offense, clearly. But in that situation, the game's sort of on the line, and you have to do it. And I just didn't see it. Now, again, the defense played well. Were there times where there's defensive gaps? Of course, there's going to be that as well. Towards the end of the game there, that last drive, I thought I was a little disappointed. I felt almost like they were slowing down a little bit. And a lot of people were saying, they've been on the field the whole game. Actually, the Raiders held the ball longer than the Chargers did. They had a higher percentage of possession time.
Then we hold the ball for 3 more minutes than they did?
Yeah. So 3 more minutes. So yes, look, the bottom line is there's no complimentary football, even from the special teams. Carlson missed the field goal too, right? If you kick that field goal, you make that field goal, who knows what happens? It could be a different game. But I do think overall that the biggest concern, even besides quarterback, has to be what are you doing on offense? What is the game plan going in with all of these players? You had the 13 personnel with both tight ends. It was working really, really well towards the end of that second half or first half. And then they just kind of abandoned it. They went back and they were going 1 tight end sets. And to me, I don't understand that. If something's working, I know we're not coaches, Murph. Okay. You're a fan. I cover the team objectively, and I'm not coach football at that level, but I don't understand if things are working, why you decide it's like, do you get too smart for your own good and you decide you're going to change it up? Because I thought it was working at that point.
Yeah. And I think those are the inconsistencies that we see from Getsy, right? And it's like, and listen, I was apologetic for Getsy, and I still will be. And that's the thing that I always say about critics. You can be critical of the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, the head coach, the team, the front office, the franchise. You can be critical of all of that, and you'll always be right for the most part until that team wins a Super Bowl. Like 31 teams' critics are right every single year. So it's easy to be critical. But that said, when you see that lack of innovation in a game like this, and again, we don't know the game plan, we don't know what the installs, we don't know that stuff, but what the optics tell you is that, it was kind of uneventful. And when it came time to, I'll give him this. I did like it that when Zeus fumbled, which was unfortunate and untimely, but then they gave the ball right back to him. And then he had a few big gains after that and give that young man back some confidence. And I love that mentality of returning the ball back to him. But that said, I mean, when you got the kind of pass catchers on this football team, like, why are we not getting the ball into their hands? We saw Brock Bowers line up at 3 different positions in the preseason. And what did we see out of him today? We saw a couple nice catches, wide open routes, right, where he just kind of broke free and there was no one around him. Minshew delivers the football, but where was the creativity in the offense today? And again, I'm not a tape guy, and I'll depend on those that are to go back and dig into it. But seemingly, just the optics from watching the game today, there wasn't a lot of creativity in routes and in sets and in like moving people around and whatever. We didn't see a lot of. How about DJ Turner? Where'd that guy go? Trey Tucker had a little bit of involvement, but again, Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams got involved at times, but I think a very underwhelming game for Devontae. And Jacoby Myers, man, that guy's a stud. That guy's an absolute stud. Why are we not like, if you're going to force the ball somewhere, like those are the kind of guys that you want to like push the ball to, right? And so anyways, Scott, I don't know, bail me out because
you're right. You're right. I mean, listen, you look at the situation here with this offense. Jacoby Myers, 3 targets, 3 receptions. So he caught every ball that was thrown to him for 61 yards. He led the team in receptions and yardage. Devontae Adams was targeted 6 times, caught the ball 5 times. Bowers targeted 8 times. I like to see Bowers targeted. That's great. But you start to look at that Madison 6 times. So Madison was targeted as much as Devontae Adams because you're right. They were going with a shorter game. They weren't going downfield. And that's fine. If you're going to do that, fine. But I think it goes back to this, and that is that first half, the Chargers were absolutely brutal, and the Raiders had to put their foot on the gas. And for all of the talk, now, again, he's the head coach. For all the talk about Antonio Pierce being aggressive, he clearly didn't communicate with Luke Getsy to be aggressive in that first half. When they had the Chargers where they wanted them, they needed to score points in that first half, build up a nice lead so that you put them down, so to speak. You know, you put down a mad dog. With the Chargers, you needed to put them down. They did not take advantage of that first half where the Chargers were just brutal. And the Chargers weren't great in the second half either. The Raiders helped them at every turn. But to me, that's the other thing. And to your point about being aggressive, you don't just get aggressive to be aggressive. You get aggressive because the game dictates it. So when the game is in a situation where the Chargers can't do anything right, they're shooting themselves in the foot left and right. Justin Herbert looked terrible. Go in and start to be aggressive there. Then you get a nice lead. Okay, then you can start to dial it back a little bit. Not like when you probably prevent defense, right? But you can start to run the ball more to control the clock because you've built up a lead. The Raiders never got in that position because once they got that first touchdown, they got very conservative on offense and nothing seemed to happen for them.
Do you think that is there a world where, listen, I love Antonio Pierce and he's the alpha in that room. Like there's no doubt. Is there a world where, though, as a good leader, you want to empower, your constituents, those around you, like you want to empower them to enable their own success? But do you think there's a world where he turned enough of the decision-making over to Luke Getsy to where he didn't have that influence? Because AP doesn't strike me as a non-aggressive guy. And like that second, 4th and 1 call, like if you're going to go for it on the early down or early in the game, and then you're not going to go for it late in the game when the game is on the line, like whose call is that? Is that AP? Is that Getsy? Like what are we doing there? And I think that if anything, as I say a young head coach, but at least a newer head coach to the league, are those the kind of things, the growing pains that Antonio Pierce is going to go through and go, okay, you know what? Next time I'm making that call. I'm going to override. I'm going to say, like, you know what? We're doing play action on this. Well, where's the play action in this game? Like after the run game got going, like where was the play action? Like, are you going to override? Because I feel like that's what good head coaches do at times is that they assert themselves and whatever their philosophy is around the football team. I feel like they assert that at times, even though they are willing, again, great leaders build up those around them. But at the same time, you're the one responsible in the end. You're the one responsible for 4th and 1, regardless if it was in the first half or the second half. You're the one responsible for the timeouts. You're the one responsible for those things, Antonio Pierce. So if we continue to see a lack of success, or already now, are we going to see somebody like him? I mean, listen, he's got all the amazing influences around him. We saw the videos with Tom Coughlin. We saw the videos with oh my gosh, Marvin
Lewis.
Thank you, Marvin Lewis. We saw the amazing influences these have. We know Joe Philbin's in the house. He's got head coaches with lots of head coaching experience in the house. Are they going to influence him and be like, hey, coach, like make that call over your OC. Don't let Getsy do that. You know what I'm saying? Am I speaking out of turn there, or is that a real world thing?
No, I think you're right. I think, listen, no matter where people sit on the Antonio Pierce question, I mean, he's the head coach, right? So that happens. Some people were very, very happy. Excuse me. Others were not, right? I think it was much more people who were happy about it than unhappy. But nonetheless, we have been saying, Mo and I have said on this show, and I think you guys talked about it too, which is he's going to make mistakes, right? He's got, like you said, he's got all those great people around him, but he's going to have to make choices at certain times. And I think today we saw a little bit of that. And it's not that I didn't expect it. I expected him to make some of those mistakes. So we saw some of those today. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, he can't coach this team. I'm not going to go there. I know a lot of you in the chat are saying this, and you don't want him as a coach already after one game. But I will tell you this, it was going to happen because you're right. He does empower his people to make decisions, I believe. So Luke Getsy, hey, you got the call, you go. And now, though, they've been through a game. So now they'll get back together and they'll say, okay, what worked, what didn't? Hey, Luke, I thought we should have done this. I let you do it, but here's what I would have done. So how do we find a better path forward? I think that's what you do after a game when you kind of do the postmortem as a coaching staff and you say, listen, what worked, what didn't work? Where did we go wrong? Because it's not just the players. They obviously made mistakes too. But the coaching staff also has to get together on that. All right, listen, we're going to take a quick break here on the post-game show. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Raiders 22-10 losers to the Los Angeles Chargers. It's Murph and Scott, the Silver and Black Today post-game show. We're coming right back. All right, we're back, and this is the Silver and Black Today post-game show. Murph from Raiders Fan Radio here, serving as your ombudsman for the Raider Nation, for the fans out there. Of course, he is from Raiders Fan Radio. If you don't already subscribe to their channel, please go do that, as well as subscribe to the podcast wherever you can get audio, as well as Silver and Black Today. You can get that wherever you get your audio, as well as our Facebook page here. A reminder, any super chat today, if you feel generous, it all goes to the One Nation Foundation, which Murph will tell you about later, which goes to Raiders charity. So all the money we get here at Silver and Black Today, we give it right back to Murph and the folks at One Nation Foundation, and he'll tell you a little bit about what they do. It's amazing stuff. I know a lot of you already know about that, but we will get into that later. But we're talking about the Raiders and their loss to the Chargers. And Murph, before we went to the break, we talked about the coaching staff and all that. Yes, he's got people around it, but remember, the head coach is the CEO. He's got to make the final decision. But like you said, going into the game, if the game plan is, hey, Luke, you call the game. If I have any input, I'll give it to you. If I don't, then it's all good. We don't know how that exchange happened, but you would imagine over time, Murph, tell me if I'm wrong on this, because I know from a business perspective, you're a leader too. You kind of let your people go and you see how it works out. And if there's something not going the way you want it to, then you jump in and say, hey, I think we should change this or change that. Or listen, here's what I would have liked you to do in that situation. Let's grow together. Let's figure out a way to work it better. Because I do think that coming out of this game, and again, I'm not a big film guy either, but I do watch every game. I'm going to go back and watch the offense. Was a lot of it on Minshew, or was it just that there just wasn't a lot of creativity, which is my first take on it as it was yours. But as a leader, Murph, you know, that's what you have to do. You have to sometimes allow people, give them the latitude. You're going to give them an inch, and if they take that inch and they do well, then you give them another, 10 inches, and then you give them another 15 and then another 2 feet. You kind of let them go until you need to rein it back in. I think that's where they might be.
Best boss I ever had was 22 years ago. And early on in my career, he told me, he's like, hey man, he's an old Southern gentleman. He said, hey man, you can't be afraid to make a decision. Now, when you have to make a decision on the spot, we may have a conversation after the fact about what you chose to do, but you've got to be able to be empowered and be confident that it's your idea, it's your thing to manage, so you manage it. And so I think that that's great leadership. And I think that that's where Antonio Pierce is coming from when it comes to his assistant coaches. And I think that's kind of what we saw today. Now, that doesn't mean, so all that said, it doesn't mean that Antonio Pierce and Luke Getsy ain't going to have some conversations in the office. Like, they're going to have some conversations in there. And so I think that's important to realize, is that there's a growth process. I think that there's a newness to this coaching staff. As much as we all rallied for AP and will continue to rally for AP because he's going to build and has built an incredible culture around this Raiders team. There is some strategy to be had. And I always say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Like your culture has to override everything. But at the same time, you still have to have a plan, and you still have to have a solid plan, and to take advantage of, in this case, on a football team, you have to be able to take advantage of the skill sets of those players that you have on the roster. What does Brock Bowers do well? What does Jacoby Myers do well? What does Zamir White do well? What does Alexander Madison do well? On down the line, right? And then you have to enable your quarterback to be able to take advantage of what those things are, and set that offense up for success. And I think listen, if we're gonna attribute all the credit for the culture change to Antonio Pierce, we have to credit the responsibility to him to change the tone on offense. Even though he's not the coordinator, he's responsible for the outcome and the production of this football team on that side of the ball. That's just the way that it freaking works when you're the boss. And so I think that we're going to see that. I don't have this idea that there's a lack of faith or that he's so inexperienced. He's coaching over his head and he's a fish out of water, whatever. I can't even see the chat because I don't have my good glasses on. So I'm assuming what's going on in there. Just let that go. That's not going to be the story for the rest of the year. He's not going to get fired tomorrow. He's not going to get fired at the end of the year. Tom Telesco is not going to get fired at the end of the year. This stuff is not going to happen. At the end of the day, you have one of two quarterbacks, you have a head coach, you have a GM, and you have an owner. Those things are not going to change. I said for years on Raiders Fan Radio, you're going to have Derek Carr is going to be your starting quarterback, John Gruden's going to be your head coach, and Mark Davis is going to be your owner. If you don't like it, well then tough shit, because that's the way it's going to be. Until finally I got to a breaking point, and because of things, whatever, then you know what happened, Raider Nation, you know the story. But as of right now, it's going to be Gardner Minshew until it's maybe not, and then it will be AOC. But Antonio Pierce isn't going anywhere. Tom Telesco isn't going anywhere. Mark Davis isn't going anywhere. So let's trust that their leadership and their ability to run the organization is going to be that they can adjust, not just based on 1 week, not just based on one game, but through the course of a season. Listen, as much of a sad sack as I am right now, Scott, and I'm sad sacking. Listen, this does not feel good. 22-10 against the Chargers. Yeah. That's ass. That's a bucket of ass. It's an awful way to start off the season. But do I think that it's going to end like it started? No. We're going to see a lot of good things out of this team this year. We've got a long way to go this year. Let's trust that it will get better. And then if it doesn't, if we're 2-6 heading into the trade deadline and everyone's screaming for Devontae Adams to be traded to the Jets, well, then fine. We'll have an honest conversation about that then, but we're not there yet.
No, it's 1 week. I mean, listen, look, fans are fans, and you should be emotional, and you should be upset, and you should feel like ass, like you said. Bucket of ass, I think is what you said. And which I don't want that in my head right now. But anyway, yeah, a bucket of ass. I get it, and I don't blame Raiders fans for feeling that way. At the same time, you're right. It's 1 week. It's a long season. Now, if they go out against Baltimore, I'm not saying they're going to beat Baltimore, right? I picked them to lose that game. Now going to Baltimore, if you see improvement, though, if you see the offense perform better, then okay, right? So you have time to fix things here. And Gardner Minshew, it's weird. I felt like, yeah, at times I thought obviously the fumble was terrible, the interception, I get it. Not good decision-making by a veteran quarterback. But again, he's a journeyman quarterback. Anybody who thought Gardner Minshew wasn't going to come with some downside was just fooling themselves. But you look at it, 25 of 33, 257 yards, a touchdown, interception, and a fumble. The 2 turnovers are the big deal. So that is key. But overall, a lot of people are saying, oh, he had just as bad a game as Will Levis in Tennessee. No, he didn't. I mean, he had some bad decision-making, but it's not the same level, okay? But I do think that, yes, he has to get better. There's no question about that. I'm not making excuses for him because I thought for sure that I really thought Aiden O'Connell would win that job unless Gardner Minshew had an amazing preseason, which he did not. So we'll see where that goes. I don't think switching quarterbacks after one game is the answer either, because you've committed to this guy. You got to give him the chance to do it. Now, everything's got to happen his way too. Did his coaching put him in the position to win the game, to do that? I don't know. I don't think so. Again, I have to rewatch the game, but you look at the distribution of the ball, what they were calling, it just didn't go that way. It just did not look good. And it's not just the players. Offensive line. I see a lot of people commenting on the offensive line about Colton Miller. Yes, these guys had some time. Remember, Colton Miller's coming back from an injury. They didn't have their starting left guard, which would be Jackson Powers Johnson. Yes, he would have been a rookie, of course, but he wasn't in there too. Okay, so remember that. All right, so they were missing some guys up front there too. You had Cody Whitehair there as well. It was a big question mark going in. So some of what happened early didn't surprise me. I thought the offensive line at times in the second half looked much better. And so there's some hope there, right? You see them get better throughout the game, even though the game didn't go the Raiders' way. Did you see some of that too? I thought the offense, for as bad as it was, as far as moving the ball and scoring with the ball, I saw Zamir White get better despite the fumble. And I saw some of that offensive line start to gel a little bit towards the end of the game. Yeah, it might've been too late and they couldn't do it at the end. They couldn't get the big play, but there is some hope there when you look at next week and getting better week by week.
Yeah, Austin Rader in there says Parham was bad. I mean, we saw, Thayer Munford give up a couple of plays.
Yes.
I mean, listen, Bosa was disruptive. Khalil Mack was disruptive. I mean, what else is new? But you have to the Raiders need to be good enough to overcome that. I mean, we've seen that out of this Raiders team before. When you're going up against a solid pass rush, and what was the young man, the guy that got the interception, the big defensive tackle for the Chargers. They were very disruptive because I think it was Bosa or Mack that tipped the ball up in the air and then the big guy caught it and whatever. Right. So they're very disruptive up front. And so listen, that's not the first time we've come up against a team that's been disruptive up front. It's not the only time we're going to see a team like that. We're going to see a team like that next week, Scott, as you mentioned, man, going up against Baltimore, man. I mean, and then traveling to the East Coast, that's a tall order for the Raiders. And go back to your earlier comments. I thought that was going to be the case no matter what, regardless if we beat the freaking Chargers by another, 40 burger, didn't matter if we go when we go on the road to Baltimore, man, that's going to be a tough, task there for the Raiders and especially up front for the offensive line. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't like we saw Minshew run around for his life back there throughout the course of the game. And he seemingly had time, certainly enough time for, 2-3 seconds for a drop and then deliver the ball. And that's where we saw, Brock get free and Devontae and whatever. And you mentioned all the numbers when it came to Devontae and Brock and Jacoby Myers. And I think that's where my disappointment and their lack of ability to continue to deliver the ball downfield was that those numbers were solid. It wasn't like it wasn't working. It wasn't like we've seen in the past where it's like they're trying to force the ball to Devontae on every freaking play, right? You know what I mean? And he's 2 for 11 or whatever. What was he, 6 for 6 or whatever, 4 for 5, whatever the heck you said, and then you add that in with the other guys' numbers. So no, the protection up front I thought was good enough. The running game, I think that, and this is where I depend on tape people and film people to inform me. But was it up front in the run game? Was it the offensive line or was it the running backs? It seems like Alexander Madison had time, and then Zamir White had time later in the game. You know what I mean? Find those zones and find those holes. But outside of that, outside of the lack of success in the running game early on, it really wasn't that bad. I'll just say this, I'll wrap it up with this. If you look at this game and you point as the offensive line as the reason we lost it, yeah.
No, I agree with that too. I think there's multifaceted here. I mean, you look at even the defense. Remember too, the defense, as well as they played, Malcolm Kuntz was out. He's out for 4 weeks. Then Tyree Wilson, who had a couple nice plays, actually. I know some people will argue with me just because they don't like Tyree Wilson and think he's disappointing. Couple nice plays. Then he goes out with an injury. I saw somebody else inside saying, well, he faked an injury. Didn't fake an injury. He wasn't there.
Oh.
So they actually, for losing bodies, they did pretty well on the defensive side. It's just getting that offense in gear and getting them to really understand what it is they're all together. And again, not surprising too, from the perspective of all the newness you have here, right? I mean, you think about it in this case, Murph, and the fact is you have a new OC, you have new players on this team, including on offensive line, you have a new quarterback basically. And so things are going to take time to gel. Now, of course you wanted to beat the Chargers. The one thing I will say this, and I picked the Raiders over the Chargers. I did. But I will say this too, is a lot.
Both of you did.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people, I think, underestimating, because on defense, especially up front, they're still pretty good. Okay. We knew, especially with the offensive line not at full power, that was going to be difficult. So that you got to give them a little bit of the credit. But I will say, overall, and I think somebody said it in the chat, and I missed who you are, so I'll give you credit if you pop back up. But the Raiders beat themselves more in this game, I think, than anything else because of the turnovers, because of missed up. I mean, when you don't take advantage of opportunity, okay, it's not a turnover, but it's almost as bad because you have the opportunity when the team is down to go down, score, put your foot on the gas a little bit, and put the pressure on the other team. And the Raiders just weren't able to do that.
I agree 100%, man. Like, I don't feel like, listen, every team has control of the outcome of the game, but at the end of the day, man, like the Chargers didn't win this one. Like, they really didn't. I don't feel like any of us that were watching that game felt like, oh my gosh, we were dominated at this one particular position. They took advantage, right? When you have your quarterback throw it backwards on whatever down and distance that was, when you do a 50-cent freaking, oh gosh, what's it called? When 50 Cent freaking did the pitch for the Mets. What is that called? The ceremonial first pitch.
The ceremonial first pitch.
You got Gardner Minshew do a 50-cent ceremonial first pitch out there to the freaking sideline, and they scoop it up, and they should have scooped and scored. But when you have those kinds of things going on, like, all right, like, did the Chargers really earn that one, or were they just fortunate because we made a horrible mistake? And so I look at that, I look at this game, look at the fumble, you look at Zamir White, like, listen, and we love Zamir White. I love Zamir White. Like, I'm not out on Zamir White yet. But those are the things that we basically just handed them the game. I mean, this was a 7-6 football game for a long time. I think 2 of my kids had birthdays.
And then it was 9-6. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, they held the Raider defense held the Chargers twice when they turned the ball over to 3 points, right? And so they had an opportunity, and that's what I mean. You had the opportunity. Your defense again and again said, "Okay, offense, here you go. We did our job. We stopped them. We held them to 3, which was good for the position they were put into on a short field." And then including after the 4th and 1 early on that they didn't get. So to me, you're right there. And Edgar Hernandez there on YouTube is saying, not an excuse, our run was atrocious. Yeah, it was atrocious. I mean, you look at, and again, to your point about not giving up on Zamir White, we'll see 13 carries, 44 yards, 3.4 yards per average. Yeah, that's not going to get it done because this offense has to run the ball more effectively to do that. But we don't know. Yes, when they ran the ball a few times, they were stuffed, but we don't know what's going on with the play calling. And again, that's where I was suspect. At times when you were having things like when you were having the 2 tight end sets and the ball was moving around and they were opening it up a little bit, then you run the ball and it didn't seem they went to the run. It seemed like they stuck with the pass. So I don't know the mix of plays there. So I think that hurt the run too, but clearly that has to get better. You have to have, you have to have it get better. But I just think that the idea that this is all on the quarterback, not true. As much as I believe the Raiders have to figure out the quarterback position again, going into next year. We'll see how this year pans out, but it's not all Minshew. It's OC. It's a lot of other things here. And with how this team was coming together, we see the defense, just like it has been all offseason, Murph, far ahead of the offense, but the offense has to catch up quickly because you can't go 4, 5, 6 weeks in trying to figure it out. You got to we got to see them figure some stuff out next week against a much better defense and whether they win the game or not, and start to say, okay, maybe they win, maybe they don't win, but whatever happens, we start to see a little more of this offense open up. We start to see a little more of the creativity that's going to need to at least hang with a team like the Ravens.
Yeah, this isn't the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens or the 02 Buccaneers. You're not going to win a championship on freaking defense alone, man. Like, we got to have some offensive output, whether we like it or not. And I'm an old school guy, and, Scott, I know you are too. Whether we like it or not, this is not our previous versions of the NFL, man. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to have offensive output. You have to have big yardage. You have to have, here's what you got to do. You got to convert on 3rd down. You got to not turn the ball over, and you got to score in the red zone. That's it. Like, if you do those things, and the NFL makes it much more probable for NFL offenses to do those things than in years past, because you don't have Mel Blount blowing up freaking Cliff Branch and taking the guy's head off. Like, and you don't have, Jack Ham coming in and wrecking Kenny Stabler. Like, those days are so long over. So you have to be able to adapt, and you can't just do it on defense alone, and so you got to be able to have some sort of offensive efficiency. Now, will that improve for this Raiders team? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to remain optimistic because we have so many playmakers, but that idea, Scott, of what you're lending to is that the defense, the offense has to catch up the defense. It has to at some point for this team to have any semblance of success, in which, listen, a lot of us feel that this can still be a 9 or 10 win football team, a team that can finish second in the West and compete for a wild card spot. I think it's entirely possible. It's not like the AFC is loaded with the freaking bunch of talent. I mean, I know the Steelers won today. They squeaked over the Falcons, who underperformed, and like there are some wins out there for AFC teams, but it's not like, look what the Bills went through today. Like the AFC didn't just like shine today where it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? No, if we can finish second in our division, like there's a lot of hope still for this Raiders team to make a playoff a push, but it's not going to happen without that offense catching up to the defense. But it's so early. And here's the thing too, this defense has kind of been together for a hot minute. This offense is not. And now you've got a new playbook and you've not got new quarterbacks and let's allow them at least a little bit of grace period to catch up. And listen, this is not an apology, so don't hear what I'm not saying, Raider Nation. But let's allow them a little bit of a grace period to catch up, to get familiar, to get some reps, to get some game speed, to get some plays under the belt to where they can find a groove. Now, again, if we get to week 5, 6, 7 and it's still not working, well, then okay. Well, then I'll sit here with a bag on my head on this show like I have before in the past. But until then, let's allow that, because if the defense is this good already, well, then we got nothing but good things to look forward to. Do I think we're going to win in Baltimore next week? I don't know. But can we make a push to be 4-4 by the trade deadline? Sure. Why not? 5-3 maybe even? Listen, here, I'll say this, and I'm going to shut up. The first half of the season, Scott, if we're going to make a move, it's going to be now.
Yeah.
The latter part of our season is rough.
Yes.
So if we're going to make the move, Raiders, we got to do it now, man.
Well, and I look at this, you're talking, and this whole thing about the offense, I know everybody agrees pretty much that the offense is the issue here because the defense performed pretty well. You look at the Raiders, they only had one trip into the red zone. Of course, they were 0-1 in the red zone. They were 0-1 on fourth down. We know that. And also just 36% on third down. Now, the Chargers were worse. They were 27%. Right. So when you have a team, you hold a team to 27%, 4 of 15 on third down, you should win that game. Right. The Raiders did not. They could not convert on their own in third down situations, too. So that to me is just egregious. That's where you have to improve. You have to be able to do it. But I'll call out, too. You talk about this team. And again, I've said that the Raiders are going to win 7 or 8 games is where I've been at. But I will say this, Cincinnati today, who for man throughout has a better roster than the Raiders. They just
there you go.
They just do. They only scored 10 points today against one of the worst teams in the NFL, New England. New England comes into Cincinnati and beats the Bengals.
Unbelievable.
Now, I only use that. I'm not comparing the two teams. I'm just saying it's the NFL. Crazy stuff happens. The Raiders didn't get off on a good foot here. And again, like you, I'm not making excuses because you know me, I don't. But I will tell you this, is that I don't think that you should dive down into the rabbit hole of despair yet, because I think that they have time to do that's early in the season. Certainly not happy with what happened today. Nobody would be happy with what happened today from an offensive standpoint, but the defense did really well. So you just need that offense to pick it up by about 60, 70% from what they were today and take advantage of situations where you have the opportunity to score points against a team who's not doing well at the time, or not turning the ball over, not committing 3 turnovers. 3 turnovers. How many teams, very rarely, it happens, but very rarely are you going to get 3 turnovers and win a ball game. It just doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that I pointed to offensively, convert on third down, score in the red zone, don't turn the ball over. Yep. And the Raiders turn the ball over a ton. And shout out Kyle Brandt and Good Morning Football. Week 1 is a lie. And we've known that for a long time, especially the longer the season gets and we're approaching an 18-game season. Week 1 is a lie. Like, the things that happen in week 1 are not the way. You think the freaking Bengals are going to freaking, you know what I mean? They're going to go over for the rest of the season, even though they lost to the Patriots? Or do you think the converse of that? Do you think the Patriots are going to win out and win 12 games? Like, hell no, that's not going to happen. Yeah. So this game doesn't identify the Raiders. And that's what I mean by that statement, Raider Nation, is that this game doesn't identify us. Is it sad? Yeah. Does it suck? Yeah. Does it, fall way short of our expectations, especially a division rivalry game? Yeah. So I'm not going to apologize for it. And, people accuse us on our show, be like, oh, you guys are Raider cheerleaders. Yeah. Except for
fans. You should be.
Yeah. Well, except now I'm not a cheerleader because we suck today. So I mean, I'll give it to you real when there's time to be real, but until there's evidence to prove otherwise, like, I'm going to have faith and optimism. And so knowing that we have 16 more weeks to go, we got some winnable games on the schedule. Like, this thing isn't over yet, right. But I'm saying though, is that week 1 it's still a lie. Like, it doesn't define the rest of the season. We'll see where this thing goes, and we'll have trust and faith that the Raiders can turn it around. But if they don't, then I don't even want to speak that into existence.
Yeah. I mean, usually, we always say it on this show that you really don't know a team what they're going to be until weeks 5 or 6, sometimes later,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And so you'll have to see what happens. Now, they got a tough one on the road, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to take our final break here on Silver and Black today on the BetUS post-game show. Make sure you visit our good friends at BetUS. By the way, 150% deposit bonus up to $2,000. Use the YouTube 150 code and you get that. But we're going to come back. We'll close it out. We'll tell you a little bit about the One Nation Foundation. We'll look ahead to Baltimore and finish up, and we'll jump into the comments and see what you guys are all talking about. You're with Murph and Scott. This is Silver and Black today. All right, we're back. Silver and Black today. Final segment here on the post-game show, brought to you by our friends at BetUS. Thanks to them for doing that. Murph and Scott with you, and the Raiders clearly did not have a good day. Did not have a good day, especially offensively. 22-10 losers to the Chargers. Yes, it hurts. It's an AFC game and a division game. Ouch, ouch, double ouch.
Mm-hmm.
You got to win those AFC games when you have a chance, and especially in the division. So we'll see how that goes. Now, the good news is, I mean, did you see Denver today at all?
No.
Okay. So Denver lost to Seattle. Bo Nix had his welcome to the NFL moment when he threw a pick in the end zone. So you have that. Now the Chiefs, we know that the Chiefs pulled it out thanks to their the referees again with the extra timeout that they shouldn't have gotten.
That was brutal. That Chiefs game the officiating in that Chiefs game was brutal, Scott.
Yeah, and I'm not pandering to Raider Nation out there by saying that. I mean, you can't have an assistant coach call a timeout and they let Steve Spagnuolo call a timeout. You just can't do that. But they allowed it.
And the inconsistencies in the offensive lineman sets.
Oh,
like that was just bad. Like, and I'm with you too. I'm not like an overall conspiracy theorist where it's like, oh, the NFL's like got it rigged for the Chiefs. But I will make commentary on the overall deficiency the decline in NFL officiating over the past 10 years. It's just. I mean, get those guys, get Mike Pereira and Dean Blandino and all those guys, get them out of the booth and put them back on the field, man, because we need them.
Yeah, it was bad. By the way, though, I'm trying to find some good here, too. I know some people just want to wallow in the misery because it's just after the game, so I get that, and I'm not telling you not to. It's just – but Raiders, on the day, 2 penalties for 15 yards only. Okay?
Hey.
Now, one of those penalties, I think, was bogus, too. The one on Michael Mayer, it was not a hold.
Yeah.
So really, I look at it as they had 1 penalty all day for 5 yards. So, I mean, that's pretty remarkable for the team. And again, I'm finding some silver linings here in the black clouds. You got to do that a little bit. So that was good. I mean, you look at discipline there. We didn't see any false starts. We didn't see any of that kind of stuff over the course of the game. So again, some of that's good. You got to take that and say, okay, how do you build on the things they did well? At least 2 phases of the game they didn't do as well as they should have, but the other defensively, they did well. I really liked to see what I saw too. Jack Jones had one bad play. Of course, he got kicked out at the end of the game for fighting with Palmer in the end zone. No harm, no foul. It was offsetting penalties, just frustration there, I'm sure, from a defense who really worked their ass off all day. But overall, I think you look at how that defense has come together, and I think the defense will only get stronger. Now, of course, Kuntz is out for 4 weeks. We don't know when Tommy Eichenberg, the rookie that I'm so excited about at linebacker too. Spillane had another great game. Talk about him. I know he's one of your favorites.
Yeah, I know he had a great game, and I love the idea that that defense got such good pressure early on that we saw the Chargers jumping offside. You talk about the penalties. Very disproportionate in terms of penalties from team to team, and the Chargers were jumping off all over the place because our guys were all over them, and that's when you start seeing false starts like that and that frequent, like that's a good indicator, man, that you're getting a good jump. And I love the scrappiness, man. The defense was chippy early. We saw Christian Wilkins delivering some shots early on and led to a little bit of a scuffle. We saw that, like you mentioned, the play late in the end zone, and it was Jack Jones and a few other guys that were tied up, and guys got dismissed from the game and whatever. But like that's some Raider shit to me, man. So sorry, can I say that? But so like that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I love to see that kind of stuff. But here's the thing, and then even to tie that back to the officiating portion of it, is that you have to be good enough to overcome that stuff. And that's what I always say about Raider fans that get into their feelings about penalties or about anything else that happens extracurricular on or off the field, is that the Raiders in their heyday, the Raiders in their glory, were good enough to overcome all that stuff. It didn't matter. None of that stuff mattered. Like, yeah, you could call us for whatever you wanted to call us for. You could get into any altercation, like whatever, but we were good enough to overcome that and still find success in a football game. And we've struggled to find that, and for many, many years now. So I know that this isn't the 70s, and I'm not going to try to pretend that it is, but I think that there's a world where you can take that mentality and adopt it for 2024 and find success. And so I think that this Raiders team, even though we lost today, has still found that. And when you see that mentality of Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins and those guys, and when Malcolm Kuntz comes back, I'm with you, Scott, that, those things are going to be represented. Bob Spillane, like, as you mentioned, had a great game today. He was flying around all over the football. And it's funny too. Tell me how you think about this. Cause I watched, like, when I see 41 flash across the screen and make a great play, all I can think of is like, oh no, we got to give him a contract. You know what I mean?
A few more weeks, if he performs like he did today, I would agree with you there.
You know what I mean? But I'm like, oh shit, do we have money?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think too, the other thing that I'll say as we look forward to the Ravens, of course, Lamar Jackson. Okay, Lamar Jackson scares me much more as a runner than he does as a passer, although he can hurt you with the pass too, clearly. But today, and I know he had one of a bunch of these yards on one play, but J.K. Dobbins today, 10 carries, 135 yards. The Raiders defense, that's the one thing I will say, as happy as I was with their performance and credit them for today, keeping this team. Because up until the last part of the game, you think about it, they held the Chargers to 16 points. Now, the best team in the NFL last year on defense was actually the Kansas City Chiefs, who held opponents to 17 points per game. And then you had the Ravens, I think, at 18, and then you had a couple other about 20, 23, right? So if you're keeping a team below 21 points a game, that's pretty dang good. But the run defense, as we saw in the preseason, was also an issue. And so against Lamar Jackson, I saw one of the comments here from I think it was Edgar or Kenny saying that, hey, we got to contain Lamar Jackson next week. And yes, they're going to have to, and they got to figure out what they're going to do with that run, because again, it came up at the end, I understand, but still the fact that the Chargers were able to have a running back go for 13.5 yards per carry average is a problem. Okay. Even though I know it's skewed a little bit by the long run, but still they were susceptible to longer runs at certain points. And when you face a team and a player like Lamar Jackson, that can really eat you up. So the Raiders have some work to do on defense, and they're going to have to strengthen that up.
Yeah, not only got to deal with freaking Lamar Jackson, they got to deal with Derrick Henry.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And if run defense is going to be a liability for this football team, then we are in big trouble on the road on the East Coast, where historically the Raiders haven't performed great. So we got, and I know that we had we had a recent, well, I won't say recent. How long has it been ago? I don't know, Scott. I've been alive a long time. But whenever Derek Carr hit Michael Crabtree in the back of the end zone in Baltimore, and it was like, oh, like finally we won a game on the East Coast. So we can win in Baltimore. We have done it in the past, and if history is a predicator to what's the present will be, we have a good chance to beat that team. Although there's a disparage of talent, if you ask me. But I want to shout out. See, it was Kenny Clark in there said, did the Raiders get humble pie served to them this week? And I think that if there's anything that's going to provide optimism, and that, me and us here at Raiders Fan Radio, we're always looking for something to be optimistic about. Did we get a reality check here in week 1, where all the confidence that we had in Antonio Pierce and all the changes that were made within the organization, and we were riding high on the culture shift? Well, did they buy into themselves at all? I don't know. That's for people inside the building to answer that question. But if that were the case, then did they get served a little bit of a reality check and a little bit of a slice of humble pie, as Kenny says? If that's the case, you're going to see a scrappy ass team that's going to go on the road now to Baltimore and is going to have something to prove. Yeah. And that gives me reason to be optimistic. Now, when you look at the Baltimore Ravens, are they a more talented football team? Certainly at quarterback and at running back. Absolutely. There's no doubt. And John Harbaugh running that defense, yes, they're a very, very good football team. But are they beatable? I don't know. Maybe. Yes. We saw a lot of beatable teams get beat today. And so are the Raiders going to be scrappy enough and have enough of a chip on their shoulder and now have enough motivation to prove themselves? We'll find out, because the character is going to be revealed quick. That's the thing about the NFL, man. It's a meritocracy. Your character is going to be revealed very, very quickly. Even though that, quote, they have an easier schedule here on the front end of the season, it's still the goddamn NFL. Like, you still got to play other NFL teams. And when you're going up against a team like the Ravens, it's going to test your character, your merit, your talent. And we're going to find out real quick what this Raiders team is made of. And I would say this is that there are no moral victories, and a W is a W and an L is an L. And at the end of the season, you want to put more in the left column than you do in the right column. But if we go on the road and we freaking stand up and pump our chests out and freaking ball out against the Ravens team, that's going to be a good showing for this Las Vegas Raiders football team and an indicator of the rest of the season. What are we made of? Let's figure it out right now. We're going to find out right now in 6 days, Raider Nation. We're going to find out what this goddamn team is made of.
Absolutely. And that's the key that we always talk about too, which is you find out a lot about teams with adversity. Now, things went pretty well at the end of last season. I know they were only game over 500, all that stuff, but still things were going in the right direction. Now, all the excitement, you come out and you lay an egg, right? You have a game that you'd like back against the Chargers and you only score 10 points. But now you have an opportunity to learn from that and move forward. That's what good teams do. Good teams take losses. They forget about them in one aspect, but they use them to get better. So to your point, Murph, to go to Baltimore, win or loss, if they go to Baltimore and play better as a team overall, offensively, defensively, everything, coaching, then you start to say, okay, so yeah, you know what? We screwed up in week 1, but look, we learned from that. We went forward. We got better. That's what you got to do. It's all about building blocks. It's all about getting better. Yes, fans would like to win every game. Yes, fans would like to have a franchise quarterback in place. It's not there. So you work with what you have. You do the best with what you're given, and you move forward. That's what they have to do. So we'll see if they're able to do that in Baltimore. Murph, before we close out here too, one of the things I told people about the super chat. If you donate on our super chat here on Silver and Black today, we collect that. We give it all of it. We don't keep any of it. We give it all to Murph and the One Nation Foundation. Will you please let everybody know about what the One Nation blah 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 Foundation does, and how they can be a part of it?
Thank you, Scott, for saying that. Yeah, so the One Nation Foundation, once we figured out we could make a little bit of money with Raiders Fan Radio, we quickly decided we wanted to give it all away. And so we give it to Raiders-related charities, and we started a nonprofit called the One Nation Foundation, and we give to Raiders-related charities like the good folks at Raider Dad, who are taking underprivileged kids and their parental figures to Raider games and also providing a tailgate experience for them. And then we just like 2 days ago, wrote a check to the Bolitnikoff Foundation, foundation for $10,000, where we are sending that their way. And that's not us. That is the listeners of Raiders Fan Radio, the supporters of Raiders Fan Radio, good folks like you, Scott, that donate to the foundation. And 100% of that money that we get taken in, we give out to them. And they're taking care of young women at risk of domestic violence and substance abuse. And so it's an amazing organization. We're going to be out there in a couple of weeks broadcasting live from their annual event called the Crab Fest, where we'll have Mike Haynes, we'll have Jim Plunkett, we'll have Lincoln Kennedy, we'll have, Phil Villapiano, we'll have a plethora of Raider legends and other, like we had Christopher McDonald, Shooter McGavin, if you need him, Dennis Hayes, Serrano. Like we had some great folks on the show last year that came through live. And so look forward to doing that again this year and here in just a couple of weeks. And we can't do that without your support. So, we always say that, like, we want to support the foundation the best that we possibly can. We can't do that without your support of the show, though, as well. So support Silver and Black today. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a thumbs up, shoot a super chat if you can. But even those non-monetary donations, man, that's what helps us out the most, because that increases advertising opportunities for us all. And then if you're so inclined, check out Raiders Fan Radio. We're on every podcast service, and you can also find us at youtube.com/Raiders Fan Radio on Wednesday nights. And don't give up hope, Raider Nation. We ain't dead yet. And just remember, and just like Arnold said in Predator, if it bleeds, we can kill it. And we've beat the dang Chiefs, and we're going to knock their asses out. We got 2 more times to go. Let's go. This shit is not over. Don't be in the dumps. Don't be a sad sack. Come on now. Let's go.
Also from Predator, get to the chopper.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that movie. I could go on all day. We could just do a video on that movie.
Oh my God.
Boy.
You know what? If the Raiders season keeps going the way it's going, we're going to find a new thing to do a podcast about. I was texting with Michelle and Jeff earlier, and we decided we're either going to do a show about tacos or Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, one or the other.
Tacos. I love it. That is awesome. Oh man, Murph. No, but make sure you support them. Check it out. And we'll have more on that too. We have some other stuff coming up with them around that. So thank you to Murph and everybody, Jeff and Michelle, and everybody who works out. And we're going to have Josh on this coming week too, by the way, Murph, to talk about Raider Dad.
Awesome. He's a good guy, man. That's a good dude, man. Doing the Lord's work out there. Absolutely.
Amazing. Getting kids to Raiders game. I mean, just phenomenal. And the pictures and the video, and you guys are out there with them too. Just amazing stuff. And that's what it's all about, getting fans an opportunity to see that, especially with the cost of how things are these days. Being able to get some kids to those games is remarkable. So that's awesome. And also, again, I'm going to give the plug. Make sure you check out Raiders Fan Radio. If you don't already do it on Wednesday nights, it is after a loss, especially, I think it's an amazing therapy because you guys are funny as heck. And, but it's a good spot to go to. I love watching it. I always have a good time when I do it as well. So make sure you do that. Murph, we're going to see you next week, my friend.
All right, man. I'm gonna little thoughts and prayers for your Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Oh, stop! Oh no. Yeah, so I know how Raider fans feel because that loss was just. I mean, it was actually worse than.
It was worse. Oh man,
it was the worst. Although my Bengal my friends that are Bengals fans, they understand it because losing to the Patriots at home, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna kill them." Yeah, okay, that's the way. But that's sports fandom. It lifts you up and then it just crushes your dreams. That's what it does. Yeah. That's what it does. But we appreciate you, man.
Waiting you next Sunday to get my spirits crushed again.
We'll see how it all rolls. Murph, thanks, man. We'll see you next week.
You're the best, Scott. Thank you so much.
All right. For Murph, I'm Scott Branson. Of course, Mo and I will be back on Tuesday with a new show. We'll recap after we've watched some film, the result of this game, and also look forward to talking with Josh Camite from Raider Dad. So make sure you join us. If you don't already subscribe to the podcast, do so wherever you get your audio. Look for Silver and Black Today. Please rate and review. Also, if you're here on YouTube or on Facebook, make sure you like the page. Hit that notifications bell on YouTube. That way, every time we have a new video, especially like when we're live now after a game, you'll know. You'll be the first to know, and you can jump in. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Good stuff overall. Don't feel so bad. You got next week. Next week, yes. Just look up. The sun will come up tomorrow. I'm not Annie, but I won't sing it. But just hang in there, Raider Nation. But we'll be back on Tuesday. For our producer, Mike Robbie, for Mo Moten, for Murph and Raiders Fan Radio, I'm Scott Branson. We'll see you guys next